Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. It was supposed to be a retirement party. Balloons, catered food, all the usual fake smile nonsense they throw together when they want to pretend they appreciated you. But that night turned into something else. Something Phil didn't see coming. My name's Monica Grady. I'm 59 years old, senior auto technician. Was, anyway. And I worked 29 years at the same freight company in Ohio. This story isn't about my job title, or how many engines I rebuilt, or how many kids I trained up. It's about the moment my manager decided to humiliate me in front of my crew, and how that little stunt blew up in his face. See, for years, I kept my head down. I let things slide. Phil, my manager, he made it real easy to stay quiet. With his smug comments, his way of twisting praise into something that sounded like a joke at my expense. I'd bust my ass fixing backlogs, coordinating teams across 3 states, and he'd tell the higher-ups it was a team effort, his favorite phrase. He never once gave me credit straight up, not once. But I stayed, not because I didn't know what he was doing, trust me, I knew. I just didn't think it was worth the fight. I'd worked too damn hard to let some middle management clown derail my career, until that night. We were all gathered in the dispatch bay. Someone had hung a banner that said, "Happy Retirement Monica," all in crooked bubble letters. There were sandwiches, punch, even some of the younger techs brought in cupcakes. It looked nice, felt wrong, like a setup. Phil stood off to the side, drink in hand, working the room like he was the damn guest of honor. I saw that look on his face, the tight grin, the eyes already scanning for the punchline he was about to deliver. He'd waited years for a stage like this. One last chance to take the credit, crack a joke, and make sure I went out quiet. I wasn't going to give him that. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't rehearse a single word. I told myself I'd just smile, nod, and leave with grace. But the second he opened his mouth, I felt it, like a damn switch flipped inside me. Something cold, sharp. I wasn't going to let him bury my work. Not this time. What happened next wasn't loud. No shouting, no slammed fists. It wasn't some dramatic movie scene. It was just the truth. Finally standing up after years of being stepped over. Quick note, before we start, how's your day going and where are you joining from? Because when someone thinks they can define your legacy with a joke, sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes silence is surrender, and I was done surrendering. That voice in my head, the one that stood up at that party, didn't come out of nowhere. It took years of being ignored, dismissed, told to step aside and let the boys handle it. That voice was built in a garage back in a Detroit suburb, with oil under my nails and a father who never once saw me for what I was worth. My dad ran a body shop, old school, noble kind of guy. He worked sunup to sundown and expected everyone else to do the same, as long as they were male. My brother Eric could skip out early, screw up brake jobs, leave tools out overnight. Dad still called him the future of the business. Me? I was just grab that socket wrench or go sweep the back. He didn't even look up when I'd finish a job cleaner and faster than Eric ever could. I remember being 13, leaning over an old Pontiac, pulling the carburetor apart while Eric sat on a stool eating chips. I had grease up to my elbows, sweat dripping down my back, and Dad walked in, nodded at Eric, and said, "Good job holding down the fort, son." I didn't say anything. I just wiped my hands on a rag and went back to it. Later that night, I asked Mom why Dad couldn't give me credit for once. She looked tired. Not sad, not angry, just worn down, like someone who'd seen the same fight play out 1,000 times and didn't have the energy to swing anymore. "That's just how your father is," she said. "He doesn't mean anything by it, but he did. He meant every damn word. Every time he said, 'Let your brother handle the heavy stuff,' or 'You've got small hands, go get that bolt,' or 'This isn't really a job for girls,' he meant it. He saw me as a helper. Not a builder, not a mechanic, just someone to pass tools and stay out of the way. By the time I was 17, I could rebuild a transmission with my eyes half shut. I knew torque specs better than I knew my own class schedule. But I also knew no matter how sharp I was, I'd never be the future of the business. That role was already spoken for, handed over, no questions asked, like some damn inheritance. I stopped trying to impress him. I stopped hoping he'd change. That was the year I started sneaking out to fix neighbors' cars behind his back. Word got around. I'd get calls to patch a radiator or fix a misfire on some beat-up Ford. I kept the money, bought my own tools. Built my own little kit in the trunk of my car. Nothing fancy, just enough to get the job done. And every time I got something running that someone else had given up on, I felt it. That thing I'd never get from my dad. That proof. I was good. I didn't need someone else's permission to be proud of what I'd done. One time, a woman down the street, Miss DeMarco, handed me $80 after I fixed her starter. Said, "You ever think about doing this for real?" I just nodded. I didn't say what I was really thinking. That doing it for real meant leaving behind the people who never thought I could. By the time I left home, I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was chasing competence. I wanted a job where no one could hand off credit because of last names or chromosomes, where I could prove what I could do, plain and simple. And if someone tried to overlook me, they'd learn real quick. I don't vanish just because someone's looking past me. So, I left. 2 weeks after graduation, I packed my stuff and moved into a crummy 2-bedroom in Toledo with a girl I barely knew and a fridge full of old mustard packets. I didn't care. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for a chance. I applied to every freight company, every service bay, every fleet yard that would give me 5 minutes. Most never called back. One finally did. Meyer Logistics, one of the biggest regional freight haulers in the Midwest. They offered me an apprentice slot. Barely paid. Rotating shifts, no benefits for the first year. I said yes before the guy finished the sentence. Day 1, I walked into that garage and every head turned like someone just brought their daughter to work. The room smelled like diesel, sweat, and cold coffee. Same as Dad's shop, just bigger, cleaner, but the looks were the same. They didn't say anything outright, not at first, but it was the way they handed me jobs. Stuff no one wanted. Tire rotations on a full fleet. Greasing axles for hours. Crawling under trucks in the dead of winter because you're small, you fit. I didn't argue. I just kept my head down and did the damn work. Then came January. Wind chills in the negatives. One of our supply trucks broke down on Route 23, halfway between Lima and Bowling Green. Everyone else had called it a day. Weather was too rough. Dispatch panicked. Truck was loaded with time-sensitive meds scheduled for overnight delivery. If we didn't get it running, they'd lose the client. I was still in the garage, organizing sockets. "Grady," one of the guys said, half laughing, "you're not seriously gonna try it, are you?" "I got chains and a torch," I said, grabbing my bag. "Why not?" The truck was iced in, buried up to the chassis. Alternator was toast, serpentine had snapped clean. Took me almost 3 hours in freezing wind on the side of the road with semis whipping past. I wired in a backup alt, bypassed the AC, and got her running just enough to limp back to base. When I walked into the shop, soaked and shaking, the place went quiet. Nobody said anything at first. Then Marty, one of the older techs who hadn't spoken more than 2 words to me in 6 months, nodded once and said, "She's got iron in her spine." From then on, things changed. Slowly, but steady. Guys started trusting me on tougher jobs. They'd pull me aside before a call and ask, "You ever seen a Cummins blow oil like this?" Like I belonged. Not just tolerated, needed. Promotions didn't come fast, but they came. Within 5 years, I was supervising the evening shift. By year 12, I had 2 shops under me and was running point on system-wide diagnostics. I didn't talk much, but I remembered everything. Who cut corners, who owned their mistakes, who showed up early, and who left without cleaning their bay. People started asking for me by name. Eventually, upper management tapped me to lead logistics maintenance. That meant coordinating repair teams across 3 states, Ohio, Indiana, and parts of Pennsylvania. I built schedules, deployed response crews, made calls in real time when engines blew on the freeway or when ice storms trapped whole fleets. We had under 4% downtime that first year. I didn't hang plaques or ask for raises. I let the numbers speak. Trucks moved, clients renewed. Nobody had to guess who kept it all running. Once during a staff meeting, a VP said, "Whoever's running ops out of Toledo must be living in that shop." "I am," I said, without looking up from the schedule board. He laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. That was the thing. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just doing the job they said I didn't belong in, and now I was running it. By the time I had 3 states running smooth under my watch, I wasn't answering to many people until Phil showed up. New fleet manager straight out of some big-name logistics company, wore his shirts tucked in too tight and carried a clipboard like it made him God. First day on site, he walked through the Toledo yard with that fake sincere smile, shook hands with the guys, then turned to me and said, "You must be the one keeping everyone in line. Or trying to, huh?" I didn't react. I'd seen his type before. Thought they were clever. Thought calling a woman feisty counted as respect. From that day forward, it was like I didn't have 2 decades of experience under my belt. He'd cut me off mid-sentence during calls, reworded my shift summaries, adding phrases like "per my recommendation" at the top, brought his own whiteboard to every meeting, even when I was the one running it. One time, after I rerouted a maintenance crew on the fly and saved 3 trucks from freezing out in Gary, he told the team, "Guess even a blind squirrel finds a nut." Dead quiet. No one laughed. I didn't either. He'd lean on the younger guys, play buddy-buddy, and when I pushed back, he'd hit me with that smug look and say, "You know I respect you, Monica. I just have a different leadership style." Yeah, one that required stepping on everyone else to make himself taller. I tried going through the right channels. HR was useless. I brought them emails, recordings of him talking over me, even a copy of a report he'd doctored. They said, "Phil's a little blunt, but he means well. He's just adjusting to the culture. That's just how he is." Where had I heard that before? I stopped wasting time trying to fix it. Instead, I started laying the groundwork to leave. Not suddenly, not in anger, quietly, on my terms. I made backups of everything. I cross-trained my team so they'd stand strong after I was gone. I started mentoring Andre, sharp, steady kid, youngest lead tech we ever had. Reminded me of me, back when I still thought hard work would get you a fair shot. Phil kept talking, kept undermining me in meetings and signing off memos with my work buried in the appendix. Fine. I'd seen how this went before. Men like him, they didn't need a reason to dismiss you, just an opening. So I didn't give him one. I smiled when I had to, played the part, took notes, stayed late. But behind the scenes, I was already walking out that door, just slow enough for it to be mine. It was late on a Tuesday when the call came in. I was standing in Bay 4 fixing a busted PTO shaft with Andre when my phone buzzed. Out-of-state number. Normally I let those go, but something told me to pick up. "Monica Grady?" Speaking. "This is Tom Reiger from Halcyon Defense Systems. You were referred by one of our logistics partners. We've got a consulting opportunity that might interest you." I didn't say anything right away, just listened. It wasn't some vague temp job. They wanted someone to overhaul their entire fleet maintenance program. Full control, high-level security clearance, a team of engineers under me, and a pay bump that made my current salary look like a typo. By the time he finished, I already knew I was going. I gave it a week before saying yes, just to make sure it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't. They sent over paperwork, NDAS, onboarding packets. The works. It was real. Clean slate. No Phil, no politics, just the work. And finally, the title to match it. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Andre. I needed to get my ducks in a row. A few days later, I called him into the break room. "Close the door," I said. He sat down, arms crossed, already sensing it was big. "I'm leaving," I said. "Consulting job in Texas. Starts in 3 months." He blinked. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I need your help wrapping things up." Quietly, he nodded, didn't ask questions. That's why I trusted him. Over the next few weeks, we worked after hours, organizing records, updating shift logs, labeling systems I'd built from scratch that no one else understood. He kept everything tight, professional. Not a word leaked. But I warned him, plain and simple. Phil's gonna find out. And when he does, he won't like it. He didn't. The day I told him, Phil acted like I just handed him a birthday present. "Well, Monica," he said, clapping me on the back. "Big moves. I always knew you'd find something more your speed. You must be thrilled." I watched him closely. Too much smile, not enough surprise. Then he added, "You've given a lot to this company. We should throw a proper send-off." There it was. I smiled back. "Sure. Whatever you think is appropriate." I didn't trust him for a second. But I didn't stop him either, because I knew how this worked. He didn't want to celebrate me. He wanted a stage, a microphone, one last chance to make sure I walked out small. Let him set it up, let him hang the damn lights. Meantime, Andre and I kept prepping. I looped in a couple of the senior guys I trained, the ones who'd been with me through shutdowns, union messes, near-miss disasters. Quiet, solid guys. I told them the truth. This thing Phil was planning wasn't about me, and I wasn't going to let it twist the ending. They understood. Didn't take much explaining. One of them, Jay, said, "So, We showing up loud or showing up smart? I said, smart. Real smart. He grinned. Even better. Phil picked the date, ordered banners, had the admin send out a mass email with one of those cheesy clip art trucks on it. Come celebrate Monica Grady's retirement after 29 years of service. Retirement. Like I was fading off to some porch swing. Let him think that. I wasn't retiring, I was leveling up. The morning of the party, Andre walked into my office with a flash drive in one hand and a coffee in the other. He dropped both on my desk. All set, he said. Roster's tight. Seating's locked. No surprises unless Phil pulls something. He would. We both knew it. But we were ready. Andre had spent the last week reaching out to every mechanic, operator, and dispatcher I'd trained or backed up over the years. No one made a fuss. They just nodded, cleared their calendars, and said they'd be there. Every one of them got a front row seat. Even Jay, who hadn't stepped foot in the office since he retired, showed up in boots and his old work jacket. Then there was one name nobody except me and Andre knew about. Gavin Sellers, Halcyon's regional director. Flew in that morning. No fanfare, no name tag. He walked in, shook my hand like we were strangers, and took a quiet seat in the back near the service door. Won't say a word unless you want me to, he'd told me. I don't. Not yet, I said. The shop floor had been cleaned up. The kind of clean that screams artificial, like scrubbing up years of oil and grit would make it feel warm and welcoming. It didn't. The walls were still gray. The lights still buzzed. A long folding table was packed with finger foods and sheet cake, plastic tablecloths in company colors. A giant "Thank You Monica" banner hung crooked above the bay door. It was cute, I'll give him that. People milled around, smiling, sipping punch out of little cups. There was laughter, the mood felt easy. But that tension, that sharp, quiet buzz under the surface, never left. Phil was working the room like a politician up for re-election. He shook hands with guys he barely remembered and hugged women he normally ignored. I watched him from across the floor, that same too-slick grin on his face, eyes darting from table to table like he was checking boxes. He spotted me, raised his cup like we were old pals. I nodded. Didn't move. You nervous? Andre asked, standing next to me. Nope, I said. Just waiting. Phil stepped up to the mic. Yeah, he'd brought a mic. Like this was a damn wedding toast. He tapped it twice, waited for the room to settle. All right, everyone, he said. Thank you for coming to celebrate our very own Monica Grady, a true legend of logistics. The room clapped. A few whistles. Some cheers from the back. I didn't clap. I watched. He was setting the table. You could see it, laying on the sugar so the sour wouldn't taste as bad when it hit. I knew his type, always smiling, always calculating. And when they see a chance to cut you down while calling it praise, they take it. So I waited. Phil cleared his throat and gave the mic another tap, like we hadn't just heard him the first time. You know, Monica's been here longer than most of you have been legal to drink, he said, chuckling to himself. A few polite laughs floated around the room. She's seen it all, really. Blown gaskets, busted hydraulics, drivers who couldn't read a warning light if it smacked him in the face. He paused, gave the crowd that salesman grin again. And of course, Monica's come a long way since her early days. I remember, this one sticks with me, her second year, middle of winter, she dropped a wrench on her foot. Blamed it on nerves, poor thing. The room chuckled, not loud, not cruel, just uncomfortable. I didn't blink. Back then, he went on, we didn't have many women in the garage. Hell, we didn't even have proper heating in the South Bay. More laughs, forced, flat. But hey, Monica stuck around. And I guess every garage needs someone to mop up the oil, right? He sipped from his cup like that line landed. It didn't. I saw it. That moment when the crowd stopped pretending. A few heads turned toward me. Jay folded his arms. Elena, one of the senior dispatchers I trained years ago, narrowed her eyes like she was doing the math on whether this was really happening out loud. Phil didn't notice, or didn't care. He raised his cup like it was a damn toast. At least now she's found a job where she can boss around robots instead of people. Silence. You could hear the air conditioning kick on. My jaw clenched so tight my molars ached. But I didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't move. I didn't have to. Andre stood. No mic. No script. Just his voice, loud enough to carry. With all due respect, he said, steady and clear, Monica ran circles around every tech in this room, including you. Phil froze mid-sip. Andre didn't wait for permission. She trained half of us in this garage. You know that? She didn't just mop oil. She kept your whole department from going under when the Westfield blackout hit. Where were you, Phil? Working remotely from your lake house. A low murmur rolled through the room. Andre looked around. How many of you were on that call when we rerouted the backup rigs after the I-75 spill? Who coordinated it in real time? Elena stood. That was Monica. Phil was 2 hours late and blamed his phone. Then Jay spoke. She fixed the dispatch matrix after that cyber attack. Remember that? IT was still running around with clipboards. Another guy, Marcus, one of the younger techs, raised a hand. She pulled me out of the East Bay fire, literally dragged me out when my glove caught. Now the murmurs were voices, sharp, clear. The dam broke. She redid the emergency protocol? She trained me on my first diagnostic rig. She stayed overnight during the blackout. Alone, she saved my job when my kid was sick. Phil's smile melted into something between confusion and panic. He looked like he wanted to shrink inside his blazer. His drink hung limp in his hand. And then Gavin, from the back of the room, stood. Sorry to interrupt, he said calmly, but I'd like to introduce myself. Everyone turned. He walked forward, casual but firm, and stood beside Andre. I'm Gavin Sellers, Regional Director for Halcyon Defense Systems. Monica isn't retiring. She's been hired to lead our next expansion, overseeing operations for 4 new sites across the Southwest. Murmurs again. Shock. Then clapping. Real this time. Gavin nodded. We're lucky to have her. Phil looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. No one rushed to help him. Phil's face was stuck in that moment. Mid-fake smile, cup dangling like he forgot what it was for. Nobody clapped for him. Nobody said a word in his defense. Andre cleared his throat and looked straight at Phil. With all due respect, Monica ran circles around every tech in this room, including you. There was no yelling, no raised fists, just the plain, sharp truth. And it landed harder than anything I could have said. Andre turned to the crowd. Let's be honest. How many of us wouldn't still be here if Monica hadn't stepped in when things got bad? Jay raised a hand and spoke up. She got us through the Westfield blackout. Phil was nowhere to be found. Elena nodded. He was out of town, remember? Sent an email saying good luck from a hot tub in Michigan. Laughter broke out. Not cruel, just honest. It cracked the room open. One by one, they stood up. She trained me my first week when the other guys didn't want to deal with a rookie, said Marcus. She restructured the entire preventive maintenance log. I use it every day, said one of the dispatchers. She took a call at midnight when my rig shut down outside Dayton. Stayed on the phone till a tow arrived, said Tommy, another lead tech. I stood still. Didn't blink. Just let it wash over me. I didn't need to speak. They were saying everything that mattered. Then Gavin stepped forward again, voice steady. I'm going to repeat what I said, since I think it got a little buried under all this revisionist storytelling. He glanced at Phil, then turned back to the crowd. We're lucky to have Monica leading our next expansion. She's not retiring. She's being promoted. 4 facilities across the Southwest, multi-million-dollar contracts. She'll be overseeing engineering, fleet logistics, and hiring. She'll have a full team reporting directly to her. That last line hit hard. I saw it on their faces. People who'd worked shoulder to shoulder with me for years, suddenly realizing just how big this move was. Phil finally spoke, voice dry. Well, that's impressive. Congratulations, Monica. He looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. Didn't know you were planning a big career move, he added. The smile was gone. I know, I said. That was the point. No one laughed with him anymore. His corner of the room might as well have been roped off. He opened his mouth again, but before he could speak, Elena stepped up beside me. Some of us pitched in for something, she said. It's not fancy, but we wanted you to have it. She pulled a small box from behind the punch table. Inside was a steel plaque, hand-etched, rough but solid. Monica Grady, lead tech. Fixer of everything, trainer of us. All my throat tightened. I'd been honored before. Awards, bonuses, the usual corporate junk. But this came from the floor. from people who knew what it meant to wrench in the dark, in the cold, with no one watching but each other. I looked over and caught Phil's eyes. He wasn't angry. Not exactly. He looked irrelevant, like he finally realized the party wasn't for him to control. The applause started slow. One clap, then another. Then it spread. Steady, loud, no cue needed. This wasn't a send-off. It was a reckoning. And Phil? He just stood there. No mic, no speech, nothing left to say. Phil sat back down without finishing his speech. Didn't say another word. Didn't look at me. Just stared into his drink like it might offer him a do-over. It didn't. 10 minutes later, he stood up, straightened his tie, and said to no one in particular, "Gotta check on a dispatch issue." Nobody asked what. Nobody offered to help. He walked out the side door like he was slipping out of a dentist's office. And just like that, he was gone. I didn't make a scene either. Didn't give some grand farewell or pull out a list of names to thank. That's not how I was wired. I stayed a little longer, long enough to hug the people who mattered. Andre, Jay, Elena, the ones who'd stood up and said the truth when it counted. No music played, no spotlight followed me around, but folks came over, one by one, and that meant more than anything Phil could have said into that mic. A guy from second shift, Ramon, shook my hand and said, "You made this place better." A junior dispatcher I barely remembered said, "You taught me what real leadership looks like." Even Marcus, who I used to have to chase for filling out his reports, gave me a quiet, "Thank you, Grady," like it came from the gut. I didn't respond with speeches or stories, just nods. Real ones. The food table was half empty, the banner sagging on one end, but the energy in the room wasn't fake anymore. It felt clean, like the place finally shook something off. Phil's name didn't come up again. That told me everything. I grabbed my jacket from the hook in the back, zipped it halfway, and stepped outside. No crowd followed, no balloons. Just the night air, cool and still, the way it gets when a storm's passed and the ground hasn't figured out if it should settle or crack. I looked back at the garage once, not because I was sentimental, but because I needed to see it one last time under my terms. For years, I'd worked through weekends, holidays, engine fires, software crashes, not for applause, but because I couldn't stand the idea of something falling apart on my watch. That shop was never about oil or tools or schedules. It was about standards. And I set mine higher than anyone expected me to. So no, I didn't need Phil's approval. Didn't need some write-up in the company newsletter or a gold watch engraved with a line they didn't mean. Because what I built, it walked out the door with me. 6 months later, I was standing on a concrete test pad in the middle of a dry, cracked valley outside El Paso. Wind kicked up dust around my boots, and the sun burned down hard enough to bake the steel under my feet. Didn't bother me. I'd been through worse. In front of me sat the latest version of our unmanned terrain vehicle, something built to haul weight across unstable ground without a driver. Clean lines, heavy suspension, sensors across the front like eyes waiting for orders. "Ready when you are," one of the engineers called. 5 of them stood behind the safety line, radios in hand, waiting. My boss, the real kind, not the title-chasing kind, nodded at me from the far end of the pad. No speech, no theatrics. Just a look that said, "You know what you're doing, let's see it." I raised my hand, dropped it. The vehicle fired up, all torque and control, crawling forward like it had a mind of its own. The entire line of engineers followed it with eyes wide, grinning like kids on Christmas morning. I didn't smile, I just watched it move. Smooth, steady, no hiccups. It worked. Back in my office, cool and quiet, I tossed my gloves on the desk and started logging notes from the test. I had 5 emails, 2 meeting requests, and 1 notification from the company newsletter. They were publishing a piece on the Nevada field trials I'd led the week before. Right then, my phone buzzed. I picked it up without thinking. Unknown number. Text only.